Well, I am glad when reputable pastors say that people like Jonathan Edwards were historicists. We're historicists. I'm so glad when reputable people, reputable men of God, say that Jonathan Edwards, John Gill, and others were all historicists. And how do we know that they were historicists? Here's Jonathan Edwards. Let's go to, on the side here, Works of Jonathan Edwards, Volume 1. This is from Christian Classics Ethereal Library, ccel.org. Works of Jonathan Edwards, Volume 1, and we're going to go down to Unit 13, or maybe Book 13, A History of the Work of Redemption, A History of the Covenant of Grace, starting from the fall of man, from the fall of Adam and Eve, to the incarnation, from Christ's incarnation to his resurrection, and then period 3, from Christ's resurrection to the end of the world. Now notice how he views the Antichrist here. Look at, he's got a section on the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Doesn't say that that was the Antichrist or had anything to do with the Antichrist. Part 2 to the time of Constantine, so think of the time of Constantine in church history. And then part 3 to the rise of Antichrist, after the rise of Constantine, to the rise of Antichrist. In fact, the Antichrist would go on at sometime after the time of Constantine, all the way up to and through the Reformation. The Antichrist would go all the way up to and through the Reformation, to the present time, in about the 18th century that Jonathan Edwards was writing, Improvement of Past Events, to the fall of Antichrist, and to the end of time. The fall of Antichrist, Jonathan Edwards did not view of until the second advent, until the second coming of Christ. That's when the fall of Antichrist would truly come. Okay? To the time of Constantine, to the rise of Antichrist, to the Reformation, the Antichrist through the Reformation, to the present time, improvement of past events, to the fall of Antichrist, to the end of time, the general judgment. So there is the general judgment. That's how you present Edwards' historicist interpretation, a little bit better than just reading miscellaneous articles. If you want to talk about to the Reformation, the rise of Antichrist, watch this. He'll talk about the rise of Antichrist in To the Reformation. From the rise of Antichrist to the Reformation, this is the darkest, most dismal day. So after Constantine, really after the fall of the Roman Empire, the darkest and most dismal day that ever the Christian church saw, and probably the darkest that ever it will see, from the rise of Antichrist till the Reformation by Luther and others. The true church in this time was for many hundred years in a state of great obscurity, like the woman in the wilderness, Revelation chapter 12. 1,260 years, 42 months, time times half a time, she was almost hid from sight and observation. Why do I say 1,260 years? 1,260 years. Watch, it's a contrivance of the devil to turn the ministry of the Christian church into a ministry of the devil. I like that so much, how he puts that. Very important. That formerly reigned in the heathen Roman Empire gives his power, seat, and great authority to the Antichrist. The time when the reign of Antichrist began, of course, Antichrist being papal Rome. It is certain that the 1,260 days or years, 1,260 years. So day equals year principle here. The 1,260 years did not begin before the year of Christ, 479. In other words, the 5th century AD. Okay, the Christian church corrupted itself in apostasy, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. And Jonathan Edwards actually begins the 1,260 years at about the year 606, through, I think, Phocas. After he claimed power of a temporal prince and was wont to carry 2 swords, he's talking about papal Rome. Okay? The Bishop of Rome assumed more and more authority to himself after the fall of the Roman Empire. After this, he claimed power of a temporal king or prince and was wont to carry 2 swords, that both the temporal and spiritual sword were both his. So again, this is historicism. As the Pope and his clergy robbed the people of their ecclesiastical and civil liberties and privileges, so they also robbed them of their estates and drained all Christendom of their money. They engrossed most of their riches into their own coffers, paying for pardons, indulgences, baptisms, extreme unctions, deliverance out of purgatory, and 100 other things. And see how well this agrees with the prophecies of the man of sin, son of perdition, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. the little horn of Daniel chapter 7, the sea beast of Revelation 13, 1 through 10, and the scarlet harlot of Revelation 17. These are all talking about the same entity, the Antichrist, that is papal Rome. That was Jonathan Edwards' historicist interpretation of Bible prophecy. And there are many more things we could talk about too. But I'm glad when pastors bring up the fact that people like Jonathan Edwards and really all of the Reformation were historicists. They weren't preterists and they weren't futurists. And again, Pastor Mathew takes a futurist view of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and says, oh, this man of sin is son of perdition is yet to come. Not what Jonathan Edwards says, not what the Westminster Confession of Faith originally said, not what the 1689 Baptist Confession of Faith says about 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. It says it's the papacy that is this man of sin, this son of perdition, representing the apostasy of the professing Christian church. During this time, Edwards continues, during this time also superstition and ignorance the more and more prevailed. The Holy Scriptures by degrees were taken out of the hands of the laity, the better to promote the unscriptural and wicked designs of the Pope and the clergy, and instead of promoting knowledge among the people, they industriously promoted ignorance. See, all the first Christians in early Christianity were copyists. They copied the Holy Scriptures. They copied them and copied them and copied them and copied them over and over and over again. They were the most prolific copyists in pretty much all of ancient history, were the Christians. In fact, while the early Christians didn't invent the codex form, right, versus scroll, you could write the scriptures on scrolls and then roll them up so they'd have scroll shelves rolled up. Jesus unrolled the scroll, in Isaiah, said, this day this has been fulfilled. But the codex form was like book form. And so early Christians did not invent codex, they did popularize it, because that's how they began copying the scriptures over and over again, was in codex, eventually in codex form is what they would use. But so don't tell me, oh, it was very expensive to produce these Bibles. And no, it was never, it had to be expensive. And the money that Christians had, if they did want to spend on it, they would spend on the pen and paper to to copy the scriptures, and they didn't need them to be all fancy. They just needed to copy the words down. They didn't need the fancy the gold inlays and all that nonsense. So the scriptures were taken out of the hands of the laity, the better to promote the unscriptural and wicked designs of the Pope and the clergy. Instead, promoting knowledge among the people, they industriously promoted ignorance. Okay, the priests themselves, most of them barbarously ignorant as to any commendable learning or any other knowledge than their hellish craft in oppressing and tyrannizing over the souls of people. Superstition and wickedness of the Church of Rome kept growing worse and worse till the very time of the Reformation. Very important. So that's Jonathan Edwards on historicism. That's historicism. We'll talk to you soon. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Soli Deo Gloria.